Look at you. You're dreaming of being a knight, aren't you? You've watched too many movies. You think you'd be the guy in the polished plate armor, winning the tourney and wooing the princess. Statistically, no. You're the guy standing in the background of that shot, knee-deep in liquid manure, clutching a wooden rake like it's a life raft. Welcome to the 11th century. You aren't the hero. You aren't even an NPC with a quest. You are biological fuel for a feudal engine that does not care if you live, die, or dissolve into the soil. It's 4:30 a.m. There is no sunlight. There is only the damp. It's a permanent state of being. Your house, if we're being generous enough to call a wattle-and-daub hut, a house is a single room that smells like a wet dog had a baby with a chimney fire. You're sharing your floor with a pig. Why? Because that pig is your 401k. If the pig freezes, you don't eat in February. So, you huddle together in the straw. You, your wife, 4 kids, and a livestock animal, all trading lice in the dark. This isn't cottagecore. This is a survival horror game where the difficulty is locked on extreme and the controller is broken. The roof? It's thatch. Sounds rustic, right? Wrong. It's a living ecosystem of rats, beetles, and something that might be a bat but could also be a demon. When it rains, and it always rains, water drips through onto your face while you sleep. You wake up thinking you've been crying, but no, it's just medieval climate control. The walls are made of sticks, woven together and plastered with mud and dung. Yes, dung. Your house is literally held together with excrement. In summer, it bakes and cracks. In winter, the wind howls through the gaps like the world's worst ASMR channel. There's no bathroom. You have a bucket in the corner that you empty into a pit out back. That pit? It's about 15 feet from your well. You're basically drinking your own recycled waste with extra steps. Dysentery isn't a risk, it's a recurring subscription service you never signed up for. You start working as soon as you can walk straight. There's no school. The only thing you're learning is the physics of sorrow. By the time you're 6, you're out in the fields scaring birds away from the crops. You're standing there for 12 hours with a wooden clapper, making noise so the crows don't eat the barley. Your arms go numb, your voice goes hoarse. A crow lands anyway and stares at you with the kind of disrespect that will haunt you for decades. By age 8, you're hauling water. The well is half a mile away. The buckets are wooden and leak. You make this trip 6 times a day. Your shoulders develop muscle memory for pain. You watch other kids, the Lord's children, ride by on ponies, laughing, wearing actual shoes. You look down at your feet, they're wrapped in rags. One of your toes is turning an interesting shade of purple. You don't have time to think about it. There's work. By the time you're 10, your spine is already beginning to take the shape of a question mark. Let's talk about the plow. You think it's a quaint wooden tool? It's a 60-pound anchor designed to tear through stubborn, clay-heavy earth that hasn't been disturbed since the Ice Age. You don't have a John Deere. You have a pair of oxen. Oxen are basically 1,500-pound mood swings with horns. You spend 16 hours a day behind them. The moldboard kicks back and hits you in the shins every 30 feet. By noon, your legs are a map of purple bruises and open sores. And the dust? It's not just dirt, it's dried manure and pulverized bone. You're breathing it in. Your lungs are becoming a terrarium. You develop a cough. It never goes away. 40 years later, you'll still have that cough. It's your theme song now. Here's where the sucking becomes systemic. You have your own tiny strip of land to grow food so your kids don't turn into skeletons. But guess what? The Lord of the Manor owns the air you breathe and the dirt you stand on. He owns the forest, so you can't hunt. He owns the river, so you can't fish without permission. He owns you, technically, in every way except the name. Your land is divided into strips scattered across 3 different fields because of some agricultural rotation system that made sense to someone in the 9th century, but now just means you spend half your day walking between plots. You can't build a fence because that would be enclosing common land, so your neighbor's sheep eat your turnips. You can't do anything about it because his cousin is the reeve, and you've learned that justice is just a word rich people use when they want something. When the sun is shining and the harvest is perfect, you aren't allowed to touch your own crops. You have to do boon work. You spend the best days of the year harvesting his wheat, hauling his hay, and fixing his fences. If you stop to drink water, that's a fine. If you sneak a handful of grain, that's a lashing. You watch the clouds roll in, knowing your own crops are rotting in the field while you're busy making sure the Lord has enough surplus to buy a new tapestry. It's the ultimate this could have been an email moment, except the email is a guy with a mace telling you to get back to work. And here's the kicker, you can't leave. Legally, you're bound to the land. If you try to run away to the city, the Lord's men will hunt you down. If you hide in a town for a year and a day, you're legally free, but that's a big if. Most people who run get caught in week 2, hiding in a ditch, eating grass, wondering if freedom was worth the sepsis. By 20, you're a journeyman of misery. You've reached peak physical strength, which is lucky because the world is about to try and delete you. Every year, there's a period called the starving time. It's that lovely window in late spring when last year's stores have run out, but this year's crops aren't ready. You're so hungry, you start looking at your leather belt and wondering if it's technically protein. You'll eat bread made of ground acorns and pea flour that hits your stomach like a bag of wet cement. Your kids' bellies start to swell, not because they're full, but because their bodies are literally consuming themselves. You aren't fasting for health. You're watching the caloric math of your family fail in real time. People start eating things that shouldn't be eaten. Bark, grass. There are whispered stories about the village 2 miles over where someone ate someone else, but nobody talks about it directly. You just know that the blacksmith's family had 8 kids in March and 5 in June, and nobody asks questions. Your wife is pregnant again. She's always pregnant. There's no birth control except prayer and hoping. She's already lost 3 children, 2 in infancy, 1 at age 4 to a fever that came out of nowhere. You don't even remember their names sometimes, and the guilt of that sits in your chest like a stone. She's exhausted. Her teeth are falling out from calcium depletion. She's 25 and looks 50. Just when you think you've got a handle on the starvation, the tithe man shows up. 10% to the church. Not 10% of your surplus, 10% of everything. The priest rolls up in his clean robes, smelling like incense instead of sweat, and he counts your sheaves with the enthusiasm of an IRS auditor who missed breakfast. He tells you it's for God's work. You've seen God's work. It's the new stained glass window in the church that cost more than your village makes in a decade. It's the abbot's imported wine. It's the bishop's 4th horse. You smile and nod because arguing with the church is a fast track to being declared a heretic. And the last heretic you saw was set on fire in the town square while children cheered. Then the Lord's bailiff takes his cut. Then the king decides he wants to go to war in a country you've never heard of because his cousin insulted his wife or something equally stupid. So there's a war tax. By the time the vultures are done, you have enough grain to make 3 loaves of bread and a prayer. If you try to grind your own grain at home to save money, illegal. You must use the Lord's mill. He takes a mulcher a percentage of the flour just for the privilege of using a wheel he hasn't cleaned since the Crusades started. The flour comes back with bits of stone in it. You'll spend the next 20 years eating bread that slowly grinds down your teeth to nubs. You can't bake your own bread either. The Lord owns the oven. You pay to use it. You can't hunt, can't fish, can't cut wood from the forest without permission. There's a tax for getting married, a tax for dying, a tax for your daughter getting married. The feudal system isn't a government, it's a subscription service where you're the product. And then the main character arrives, a knight. In the stories, he's a protector. In reality, he's a high-functioning sociopath with a horse. If there's a war, the enemy knights use a strategy called chevauché. They don't fight other knights. That's dangerous. They burn your barn. They kill your ox. They trample your garden. Why? To ruin the Lord's income. You are the collateral damage in a rich man's PR stunt. You stand there in the ashes of your life, clutching a burnt hoe, while the noble warrior gallops away to find a more expensive target. Your ox, the one you spent 15 years working beside, the one you named, the one that was your entire agricultural infrastructure, is dead in the field with a spear through its neck. Without the ox, you can't plow. Without plowing, you can't plant. Without planting, you die. You beg the Lord for help. He tells you he'll loan you an ox. The interest? Half your harvest for the next 5 years. You take the deal because the alternative is watching your children starve. Sometimes the knights stay in your village. They requisition your house. You sleep in the barn while, sir, whoever drinks your ale and hits on your wife. If you complain, you're disrespecting a warrior of God. If your wife catches his eye a little too much, well, there's a reason half the kids in the village have suspiciously noble features. But then, 1348 happens. The big one, the Black Death. It's a literal apocalypse. You watch your neighbors develop black, weeping sores in their armpits. The smell is indescribable rotting meat mixed with sulfur and despair. You watch the priest refuse to come to the houses because he's terrified. He stands at the edge of the village, shouting prayers from a safe distance like God has a hearing problem. You spend weeks hauling bodies to a pit until the pit is full, and then you just start stacking them in the street like cordwood. Your daughter dies on a Tuesday. Your son dies on a Friday. Your wife makes it to Sunday before the fever takes her. You dig the graves yourself because the gravedigger is already dead. The world smells like death. The air tastes like smoke from the constant burning of contaminated clothes and bedding. Entire families are wiped out overnight. You walk through the village and hear nothing. No children playing, no chickens clucking, no dogs barking, just silence and flies. It is horrific. It is the end of the world. And for you, it is the biggest promotion in human history. Suddenly, there are more fields than there are hands to work them. The supply of labor has cratered, and the demand is through the roof. For the first time in your lineage, you have power. You go to your lord who is currently shaking in his castle because his own cook just died and he doesn't know how to boil water, and you tell him the deal has changed. No more free labor, no more bowing in the mud. You want wages, you want a lease, you want a seat at the table. If he says no, you walk. You go to the next village over where the lord is so desperate he'll give you a manor house just to keep the weeds from taking over. The government tries to stop this. They pass laws, Statute of Labourers, 1351 fixing wages at pre-plague levels. You ignore them, everyone ignores them. What are they going to do? Arrest the entire surviving population? They need you more than you need them. And for the first time in 1,000 years, a peasant has leverage. You spend the next 20 years winning. You buy up the land of the dead. The miller's widow sells you her fields for a pittance because she's moving to the city. The tanner's estate goes to auction. You're there, bidding, winning. You hire the few survivors, you pay them actual money, they work your land while you manage, plan, expand. You stop wearing burlap and start wearing dyed wool. The first time you put on a red tunic, you stand in front of a polished copper mirror and barely recognize yourself. You trade your pottage for salted beef and fine white bread. You build a real house, 2 stories, with glass windows. Actual glass. You have a bed that's off the ground. You have a table. You've made it. You are the yeoman, the success story, the man who beat the Middle Ages. You sit by your fire, drinking expensive wine from a heavy, shining pewter flagon, watching your grandchildren play on a floor made of actual wood instead of packed dirt. They'll never know the hunger. They'll never know the fear. You won. But here is the final, cynical punchline of your existence. That white bread you love? It's been adulterated with chalk and bone meal to make it look pure, because white bread is a status symbol and bakers know how to cut corners. It's wrecking your digestion. You're constipated for days, then dysentery for days, in an endless cycle. That beautiful wine? It was fermented in vats lined with lead and served in a pewter cup that is literally melting your brain. Pewter in the medieval era isn't regulated. It's often 30 to 40% lead. Every sip is a tiny dose of neurotoxin. Your hands start shaking, you drop things, you forget names, you get angry for no reason. Your joints are screaming with gout because you swapped a vegetable diet for a high-protein, high-toxin lifestyle. Salted beef every day, rich gravies, meat pies. Your kidneys are crystallizing. Your toe swells up like a plum. You can't walk some mornings. The glass in your windows? Made with lead, too. The pewter plates? The cosmetics your wife uses to look noble white lead face paint. Your whole house is a slow-acting poison delivery system, and you paid extra for it. You survived the famines, you survived the nights, you survived the literal plague, but you couldn't survive your own success. The very things that proved you were above the peasantry are the things that are poisoning your blood and rotting your nerves. You spent 40 years fighting to get out of the mud, only to find that at the top of the mountain, the air is just as lethal. You're the richest man in the graveyard, and as the lead settles into your bones, you realize the game was rigged from the start. Whether you're a serf in the dirt or a master in the hall, the medieval era always gets its pound of flesh. You die at 52. They call it old age. Your grandchildren inherit your wealth. They don't know that every coin was paid for in pain. They don't know about the hunger, the fear, the bodies. They just know that grandfather was successful. And somewhere, in some other village, another kid is waking up at 4:30 a.m., staring at the damp ceiling, sharing a floor with a pig, about to start the cycle all over again. The Middle Ages don't end, they just find new victims.